the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Welcome everyone to Radio Free New York. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today. Happy Friday, everyone. We're live here on WYSL from 12 to 1 p.m. on this Friday, the 7th. And shout out to our friends down the line, WACK out in Newark and WENY, The Patriot, down in the southern tier of New York. And all of our friends who are listening online, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, all those places. You guys rock. We have a very interesting guest on today, Scott Lincicome from the Cato Institute. And, Scott caught my attention earlier this week about the Kodak deal. Now, of course, the Kodak deal surprised a lot of us. And it was last week when this article came out. Scott wrote this article called "The Government's Plan to Turn Kodak into a Pharmaceutical Company Sure Seems Underdeveloped." And, of course, Kodak, an important pillar of industry here in the Rochester region and very important to all of us. But so Scott is a senior fellow in economic studies at the Cato Institute and writes about trade issues and other economic issues. And so, Scott, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive into why you're skeptical of this Kodak thing.
Sure. So I, as you mentioned, I'm a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian-leaning organization. A think tank, and so I write on economic policy issues, whether it's domestic or international. My background is, I interned at Cato a long time ago, but actually then spent almost 2 decades as an international trade attorney. I escaped big law actually just recently, and have been at Cato full-time for now a little over a month, but have been an adjunct scholar at Cato for quite a long while, writing again on international economic issues. It has been a really exciting and fun change, allowing me to speak more freely and write on a lot of interesting subjects in the news.
Yeah, right on. And again, that topic on Kodak caught my attention. So let's dive right into that, and let's talk about. So first of all, can you help our listeners understand like what happened? The headlines in Rochester are, Kodak's getting this $765 million loan from the U.S. government, and we're going to produce drugs here in Rochester. It's going to make Rochester great again. Kodak's going to be great again. It's going to be awesome. We're all super excited about it. Why? So should we be?
Well, I think I would say it's probably not time to pop the champagne corks just yet. From a purely technical perspective, this was really just a deal to make a deal. So, as you know, the government's press releases and so forth have stated plainly, this was a kind of an opening expression of interest of sorts. So now the government has to do what's called due diligence and determine if the proposal and application that Kodak put together that looked pretty good actually is as good as it looks. At the same time, it looks like Congress will also be digging into this a little bit. one of the issues here is that this loan was really issued unilaterally by the Trump administration. So, in other words, unilaterally meaning without really congressional oversight or input or consent. Because President Trump has invoked emergency authorities under the Wartime Defense Production Act because of COVID. And as part of that, the president issued an executive order authorizing the International Development Finance Corporation, which used to be called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, to issue loans to handle emergency issues related to COVID. Now, this EO, this executive order itself, raised some eyebrows because OPIC, DFC now it's called, doesn't have any experience providing loans domestically. OPIC was created to actually provide loans to mainly poor developing countries to do things like build dams or build roads and infrastructure so that they can then, go develop and buy U.S. products. So that was the first kind of question mark. But now that the deal has been announced, at least the outlines of the deal, beyond the kind of technical issues of going through due diligence, there are a lot of questions about the need for this in terms of, leaving Rochester and Kodak aside, the need for this for the U.S. economy and for fighting COVID. And then just some head-scratching details about whether Kodak is really the best positioned company to provide any help that is needed.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you laid out a lot there, and so just stepping back with some of this. So this isn't something that the U.S. government, or at least this aspect of the U.S. government, is used to doing. They're used to providing infrastructure loans to other countries. So they've gotten into this, justified it based on COVID-19. They said, okay, under the Defense Production Act, we're able to go and do this.
Right.
And they're saying that this is such an emergency in this time of pandemic that we can give these loans to pharmaceutical companies or anyone with the capacity to produce. It's not drugs exactly. Is it what's it called? The active pharmaceutical ingredients, right?
Yeah,
so
APIs,
like the precursors to APIs. So precursors to drugs. So they're able to justify that. I mean, is there normally, like, I guess there's no normal in this situation, right? Is there normally like a timeline for, like, if this is an emergency situation, how quickly does this stuff need to turn around to address the emergency? I guess that's what I would think first.
That honestly raises one of the questions, and it's one that I posed in the blog post that you mentioned. But there really is a timing question here. Beyond the due diligence aspects that I just mentioned, which I'd assume is going to take a little while, the public reports say that Kodak won't be really getting off the ground and producing these APIs for at least a year or more. So that's the first kind of timing issue. We don't hopefully expect to be in the middle of a pandemic and crisis in, say, August of 2021. Beyond that, though, the issue is that the APIs that Kodak is producing are not clearly related to COVID in any way. There were some reports that they might be making the ingredients needed for hydroxychloroquine. But beyond that, there's really no transparency here on what they're making. And they're making generic drug inputs. They're not making vaccine materials or something that we might need for a COVID vaccine. So that's the other kind of urgency aspect of this. I mean, I think that even a libertarian could say, look, the federal government throwing billions of dollars at a vaccine and at vaccine manufacturing is okay in this kind of crisis. But we're not really doing that here. And so that's, I think, one of the issues. The other part of the timing thing that doesn't quite make sense is that, look, the government has, in Congress and the Trump administration has said, look, we really don't have the data on pharmaceutical supply chains, on API production, for example, and on generic drug production in the United States. We really don't have the data we need to determine whether there are weaknesses in the supply chain. So as part of the CARES Act a few months ago, Congress and the administration decided to commission a very detailed study of the pharmaceutical supply chain and to really map out where there might be weaknesses. But that study isn't going to be out for a little while. And so again, there's this timing issue about what is the Trump administration going on here if we don't even know where the weaknesses in the supply chain lie, and quite frankly, if there are any weaknesses to begin with.
Yeah, so I definitely want to come back to that because I feel like that's one of the stronger aspects of what I've seen people make the case for this. Like, well, we need to bring back domestic production of these active pharmaceutical ingredients.
Yeah.
And that is a national security threat in some sense that we don't have that. So I want to talk about that a bit more after the break. We'll be back in just a few minutes here on Radio Free New York with Scott talking about that Kodak deal. Talk to you soon.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Catch a wave at Waldameer.
Waterworld opens daily at 11 with a giant wave pool, water playgrounds, relaxing river, and exciting body and tube slides like the incredible new 6-lane Rally Racer. The Rally Racer is the longest, fastest slide in Waterworld. Come experience the excitement as you race your family and friends. And Waldameer opens at noon with a variety of thrill rides and family rides like the exciting new Whirlwind spinning coaster. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, Waldameer is limited to 50% capacity, so there's no free admission. Guests must purchase admission tickets at waldameer.com or at the park. Children under 1 are free. Face masks are required. So visit waldameer.com, purchase your admission tickets, and come have some fun.
Catch a wave, catch a day at Waldameer. Your wet and wild summer getaway. Excitement waits for you at Waldameer. Waldameer in Erie, PA.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Scott from the Cato Institute. And we're talking about that Kodak deal. And thanks, folks, who were participating in the conversation online. I got a comment from Jay who says, it would be nice if they brought back more of the business local. Lower taxes would do more than any government handouts or loans. Yeah, no, I think we're on the same page, Jay. I'm definitely a fan of that.
Well,
But go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, especially when it comes to API production, if you actually talk to industry experts about one of the reasons why some of our API production got offshore, and I know we're going to talk numbers in just a sec, but one of the reasons is because of really onerous environmental rules. And so to the extent that you're going to bring this stuff back, you're going to really have to deal with the regulatory issues as well. And, quite frankly, it's an open question about whether that's the type of deregulation you really want, but it is going to need to be in the conversation.
Right. So it's just really expensive to comply with showing that you're, And we have this discussion among libertarians all the time, like, how much do you balance that if there's a negative externality, if you're putting a pollutant out in the environment? No, we don't want that. No one wants that. But okay, but where do you balance it where it costs so much to produce anything that it becomes impossible to do business at all? So you just offshore it.
Right.
In theory, so I mean that's that, and that's something that I'm sure you pay attention to quite a bit in your work. But getting back to this specifically, that is the stronger argument that I've seen from folks is to say that look, our active pharmaceutical ingredients aren't produced here enough, that China is producing them, and that if we have not even just this pandemic but a future pandemic where overseas trade becomes difficult, or pharmaceutical ingredients from China are cut off because they just don't want to sell to us, is that a legitimate national security concern right now?
Yeah, and so I think you tricked me. I was about to answer one way, and then you said right now. But there is, I think, a theoretically legitimate argument to a protectionism and nationalism and for national security reasons, right? I mean, you can think of theoretical arguments for this, where you want to have sufficient production in, for example, aerospace or defense and weaponry and so forth. So that and I think you can even say that there's an argument for core medicines and pharmaceuticals, whatever. The issue though is if you actually look at the data we have on, well, for example, API production, what you see from the FDA is that the United States actually has the largest share of API facilities in the world. About 28% of them are in the United States. And that, according to the FDA, it's about 510 different facilities in the United States producing APIs in 2019. 221 of which produce what the FDA and the World Health Organization have called essential medicines, so inputs for essential medicines. Mm-hmm. So that data is all we have right now because, again, the CARES Act is going to try to get us some better data on output because it only tells you facilities. It doesn't tell you what they're producing and how much they're producing. But the data we have there are pretty good. They don't indicate a serious crisis. And there wasn't, at least among the industry and the FDA before this, a lot of concern about there being an API crisis. The FDA did last year say, look, we need better data on this. But in general, there was no indication that there was a major shortage or crisis at hand. Beyond that, the other data we have on the U.S. pharmaceutical industry show that it isn't in any way dying. Look, there's no doubt that U.S. pharmaceutical producers and global pharmaceutical producers have substantial operations offshore, including in China and India. But if you actually look at what's still going on in the United States, you're still talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in production, so in output. You're looking at hundreds of billions in pharmaceutical preparations, so this kind of API stuff. And you're still looking at tens of billions in research and development and capital expenditures. So research and development to develop new things, capital expenditures for things like structures and equipment and so forth. So there's not a real clear indication here that the United States pharmaceutical industry and that pharmaceutical manufacturing is on its deathbed. Certainly, again, there could be discrete weaknesses here and there that these top-line data don't show us. But again, that's what the CARES Act is trying to, that CARES Act study is going to dig into a little bit. And in my opinion, it certainly makes sense to at least wait until we have those stats before, just throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the counter argument is like, well, we can't wait. But, you're saying that given the data that we do have now,
right,
we can wait. Like it's not the crisis that it is made out to be.
Exactly. And again, so I think it's really critically important for everyone to actually look at what the regulators, so in this case, the FDA, were saying last year. So pre-COVID, before we all had ever heard of coronavirus, before our lives were changed forever, it's important to look at that. And again, the FDA, in multiple reports and congressional testimony and the rest, said generally there is no crisis here. There is not any sort of major drug shortage. There's not any issue. And I should note on the shortage point, even since COVID hit, the FDA has not reported any really troubling spike in drug shortages. So these supply chains we hear about that have supposedly failed us and require all this type of, industrial policy and protectionism and the rest, the supply chains have thus far held up pretty well. I mean, look, there have been massive spikes in demand. There have been shortages here and there. But if you look at, again, the kind of drugs that the FDA tracks, there hasn't been a massive change in shortages or anything like that. And so, again, we really need to ask about the urgency of this, particularly given in Kodak's case that they don't appear to be making anything related to a COVID vaccine, which of course is quite urgent.
Right. And like those facilities are kind of being set up a bit separately from this.
Right.
I understand like that's its own thing, right? Mm-hmm. So this is looking at long-term strategy. So you think like theoretically we can make the case that we should bring some of the APIs back, production back to the United States, but we don't have the data on that, so we're not sure how to act on that. But we're jumping in anyway, and we're jumping in, particularly with a company like Kodak, which the folks have strong feelings about Kodak one way or another in Rochester, but so they handle chemicals, right? They're set up for that. They're no longer doing film production at the scale that they were doing previously. They at one point in time owned a drug company like 30 years ago. Yeah. So what? I guess why not them, right?
Well, yeah, but I think the question really is why them, not why not them, because. Mm-hmm. As I just mentioned, there are hundreds of facilities in the United States that produce APIs. And even though Kodak has chemicals experience, it doesn't appear to have recent pharmaceutical experience. And if you talk to people in the pharmaceutical space, they tell you that for regulatory and other reasons, making chemicals is just not the same as making pharmaceutical inputs. That yes, it's some of the same raw materials, and yes, it's some of the same equipment, but the processes, the regulatory approvals, and a lot of the expertise in terms of chemical engineers and the rest is very, very different. So even assuming Kodak's finances were great, even assuming Kodak didn't have an unfortunate history of mismanagement, even recently, there is this question about why is Kodak getting this taxpayer money and not, an API producer that's already set up and with all of the experience and manpower?
Right. So it might make more sense to scale up production at an existing facility than to try to retrofit this Kodak production facilities for this and bring in the talent and bring in the expertise and hope that it's all managed effectively. Yeah,
exactly. And then of course this raises another issue that I noted in my piece is that, look, if Kodak has this super awesome business plan, let's say they really have a tremendous plan to adopt advanced manufacturing techniques that will make them globally competitive and really a superstar in the generic APIs space. And this is according to the Trump administration, this is an essential product that is in desperate shortage and American pharmaceutical producers desperately need. Then why aren't we having private markets finance this? It would seem to be a no-brainer deal. Why is the government needed at all?
That is an excellent question, and I want to dig into that a bit more here on Radio Free New York after a break. We'll talk to everyone in a few minutes.
More than twice the power.
WYSL.
More powerful FM 92.1, FM 95.5 West, and 1040 AM WYSL Avon Rochester.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for today. We'll see a mixture of clouds, a little bit of sunshine, just a brief shower here or there, but most of the day will be dry. Temps in the 70s and low 80s. For tonight, we'll see clearing skies, lows around 60. Saturday looks nice, partly sunny, slight chance of a shower well south of Rochester, but a good-looking day. And we're looking at sunshine, mid-80s on Sunday. I'm Rich Cornelia, WYSL.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hello, I'm Alan Ginsberg of the A.M. Ginsberg Advisory Group. Hope you're coping well with the changes we've all had to make in day-to-day living during these crazy times. So, now that you've done all your projects, cooked every new recipe you have, and made your YouTube videos, ask yourself, are your financial plans and investments working in today's world? Is your family secure if you die or become disabled? Are the wills you made 10 or 20 years ago still valid today? Now may be the time to evaluate where you are financially and review your estate planning as well. We're available for appointments by phone or Zoom meeting, or we can meet in my office with CDC compliant procedures. Please give us a call, 585-377-4720, or check out our website at amginsbergadvisorygroup.com.
Securities offered through Securities America Inc. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc. A.M. Ginsberg Advisory Group and the Securities America companies are separate entities.
Because your future is worth it. MGM Associates Insurance. Proudly serving the region since 1984, MGM can meet your coverage needs, ranging from home, condo, and auto, all the way to specialized policies for business, workers' comp, to limo and taxi insurance, and coverage for tech professionals like IT specialists. They can also help lead you through the confusing maze in the new world of health insurance coverage and options. MGM Associates is large enough to serve you, but small enough to care, so you don't have to wait in line on some 800 number to get prompt personal attention. MGM Associates is the only winner of the National Best Practices Award 5 times in a row. MGM is proud to support veterans groups, including Heroes Home Advantage. For your personal, business, home, or professional insurance needs, put the experience of MGM Associates Insurance on your team. Locally and proudly owned at 1745 Penfield Road in Penfield. 381-7008 or mgminsure.com, an associate of Finger Lakes Fire and Casualty, Route 227 in Trumansburg, New York.
At Family Furniture in Perry, get everyday savings without big chain store hassles. Find out why Family Furniture is the shopping destination for thousands all over the region. For the best quality and prices in flooring, whether it's carpet, laminates, luxurious hardwoods, or ceramic tile. Great financing deals for qualified buyers and expert professional installation. Follow us on Facebook to see great new deals and new selections. Family Furniture in downtown Perry, serving you for over 70 years. Open Monday and Tuesday till 5:30, Wednesday till 12:30, Thursday and Friday nights till 7, Saturdays till 4.
Open Door is a great place because it helps you with your whole self. It's not just about the addiction. For me, it's been just getting in touch with that little boy who never really grew up. I don't feel like I have to save him anymore. I can just let him live. I don't have to be afraid. And I can't think of anywhere else I would want to be to do that. It's safe, it's challenging, but it works.
Go to opendoormission.com.
Enjoy summer with fresh homegrown sweet corn and veggies 7 days a week at J&A Farm Market and Greenhouses, Route 15 just south of Exit 9, the Lakeville exit off 390. Now visit J&A's new location on 5 and 20 east of the Avon exit near Bronson Hill. J&A.
Dispatch Custom Milling in East Rochester carries metal or steel cutting blades, Lennox, Sterling, and MK Morse bandsaw blades from 1/4 inch wide to 2 inches wide, with many in stock. Sharpening service available. Visit dispatchcustommilling.com.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We're here on WYSL live until 1 p.m. on this Friday, and if you want to participate in this conversation, you can comment online or you can give us a call. Give us a call, 585-346-3000. If anyone wants to come in and defend Kodak too, you know, we've been talking a bit about, you know, like what they are. And again, this isn't really about, you know, Kodak really. It's more about like kind of the bigger policy and kind of the bigger way we approach challenges of like, do we have the stuff that we need, and what's the government's role in intervening or creating the market. And like so folks have told me, and Republicans too have said like, well, you know, we have a market failure in this area, and that's why the government needs to intervene. And but what we've been talking about, the data that we have right now suggests that either that isn't the case, or at least we don't know that's the case.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a great point. You know, this isn't just a Kodak issue. It's a really broader question about what is the optimal way for the United States and for U.S. policy to handle national security issues and their relationship with trade. And manufacturing. And, you know, the fact is that there's really not a great case in practice for, you know, some sort of massive reshoring plan or industrial policy plan to bolster national security, regardless of the product. I mean, first, there's a ton of academic literature that shows that, you know, in the real national security space, you know, so in other words, in terms of preventing war and so forth, countries that trade together, countries that are interdependent in terms of their supply chains, don't go to war. And so mutual dependence of sorts actually helps prevent the exact types of armed conflicts that we seem to be caring about when we talk about national security and trade. But beyond that, I think it's really important to look at past instances of the U.S. government actively intervening in a sector and propping it up, whether through protectionism or subsidies, in order to bolster national security. So on these express national security grounds, right? And, you know, the history is pretty clear here that you know, we really don't do a very good job of creating thriving industries when we deem them essential to national security and then impose all this type of, you know, again, protectionism and industrial policy. You know, and I should note, you know, I want to leave out the kind of defense industry because, like I said, nobody is saying here that we need to offshore our tank construction or whatever. But if you look at industries, even things as critical as shipping, for example. The Jones Act has been on the books for 100 years, and the Jones Act was expressly created to bolster our shipping industry and our maritime fleet. And what the Jones Act basically said was all ships that do coastwise transport, so essentially shipping from U.S. port to U.S. port, have to be made in the United States, crewed by Americans, and owned by Americans. And so that the theory there was that the Jones Act would thus produce a thriving merchant marine, a thriving shipping industry. Well, let's fast forward 100 years later, and nothing could be further from the truth. The U.S. shipping industry is expensive and tiny. The merchant marine has disintegrated, and the Jones Act has really utterly failed to achieve those national security objectives. But there, we can leave ships aside and look at recent examples. For example, steel and aluminum, right? The president has claimed that we need a thriving steel industry for national security, so he imposed all these tariffs on imported steel, and the result has not so far been the resuscitation of the U.S. steel industry. And I would argue, quite frankly, the U.S. steel industry had 70% domestic market share before the tariffs, so there wasn't really even a clear case for implementing them. But there were a lot of lobbyists that were very effective in getting that done. But since then, look, check out the steel company stock prices, and do that before COVID. Of course, COVID has changed that. And it's really just not a big winner. And it's really case after case after case you can look at through history that the U.S. government really just hasn't done a great job of implementing or intervening in markets to prop up industries on national security grounds. And so that's, again, where I question this idea that we really need to reshore everything to be more resilient. And in fact, I think the better argument for intervention is in terms of diversification away from China. If we think China is an adversary, if we think that China is doing very bad things, for example, in human rights, or foreign policy, and there is a need to diversify supply chains, well, that makes good sense. And there are things that the United States can do. For example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which President Trump
TPP,
ditched.
we could have opened up more trading with that. And then
exactly. So that was supposed to expand trade with Vietnam and other countries outside of China. And so that there's an argument there. But that doesn't mean we need to reshore everything and prop up companies to do it.
Yeah, so jumping back to a bunch of the, I know we have more tariffs coming out. I think just aluminum tariffs on Canadian stuff just came out today or the last couple days. But I think but a lot of people, even if they're not looking at numbers, they feel like manufacturing has left to U.S. And is that the stronger motivator behind a lot of these policies? Is that people feel like manufacturing is leaving, they see some of the factories moving away from their towns, and seeing a politician like President Trump take action on this issue seems nice. It seems like it is necessary.
Yeah, and I think that there's a really important disconnect in manufacturing between how much we're producing and how many people it takes to produce that stuff. Because there is no doubt that the United States has lost millions of manufacturing jobs since the late 1970s, when manufacturing employment peaked in this country. But at the same time, if you look at manufacturing output or manufacturing value add, since, say, the mid-90s when all this globalization occurred, you actually see that manufacturing output is up, and up significantly. And it's up in important sectors like transportation and aerospace, and in semiconductors and other durable goods. Yes, the United States has lost industries, or at least has seen industry shrink. We haven't really lost any, but some industries have shrunk. Some of those due to offshoring. Textiles is a great example of this. There are just not a lot of T-shirts made in the United States because that's a really low value product that isn't very capital intensive. So yes, cheap labor is going to dominate there. But in all these other areas, and particularly ones that are really critical to national defense, like I said, I mentioned aerospace, a lot of the defense industry and so forth, we have not just a strong industry, but one that's been increasing and thriving over the last 20 years. It's just people don't see these things. They see a factory that's gone. They, of course, either know people who have lost their jobs or know people who know people. And those things resonate on an emotional level and in ways that the data I just provided just don't. And that's a very difficult thing to overcome, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, like hearing like, oh, well, like, domestic manufacturing production is still at these levels. Like, it's just all numbers to a lot of folks, and I get that. But like when your brother has lost a job, like,
exactly,
yeah, you feel that. You're like, oh man, this is affecting my family. This is a crisis.
Right. And the other thing that has happened in the United States that is never discussed is a lot of the offshoring of sorts wasn't offshoring at all. It was manufacturers moving from certain parts of the country, primarily the Northeast and the industrial Midwest, to other parts of the country, mainly the Sun Belt and the western part of the country. So, auto manufacturing is a perfect example of that. The Fed a couple years ago had this great study on manufacturing employment. So this is employment, not just output, and found that, states in the South were adding tens of thousands of jobs, and factories especially in the automotive sector were popping up all over the place. But of course, that was taking jobs, so to speak, from the Rust Belt area and the Northeast. And the same thing has happened in other industries as well. And so, again, it's difficult to blame South Carolina, but it's quite easy to blame Mexico. And that's, of course, what happens most of the time.
All right, well, we'll wrap up this discussion coming back here on Radio Free New York in just a few minutes.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
If you're looking to market and grow your business, make new business connections, and give back to the community in a meaningful way, consider joining the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're the largest suburban chamber in Monroe County, and we offer networking, education, marketing, insurance, and advocacy. You do not need to live or work in Greece to join. Our members come from throughout the region. In short, we're better together, and together, we're moving business forward. Visit greecechamber.org or call 585-227-7272 to join today.
A reminder from Abate Monroe County. American bikers aim toward education. Distracted driving is dangerous, so pull over and eat. Don't try to read your mail and newspaper, and stay off your cell phone. Make a mental note to be more alert, making it a habit to expect the unexpected. Remember to look twice. Save a life. Train yourself to watch for motorcycles which are harder to see. Join Abate, and your family will be protected with a free $4,000 accident policy. Ride safe. Ride free. Ride often. Abate. If you ride with us. Google Abate Monroe County.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whenever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York.
Welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm Kevin Wilson, your host for today, joined by Scott Lincicome from the Cato Institute. And we're talking about we were talking about the Kodak stuff in the beginning, where they may be getting a $765 million loan to create 360 jobs, which is about $2.1 million per job. That's only government could think that that's a good trade-off there. But we were talking over the break about like how some of these specific policies play out. And Scott, you had mentioned the washing machine thing. So what's going on with washing machines?
Right. So President Trump was in Ohio yesterday at a Whirlpool factory to brag about the amazing effects of his washing machine tariffs, which he implemented in January of 2018. And to announce that we mentioned the aluminum tariffs, reapplying those on imports from Canada, and also announcing a plan to have more economic nationalism in the medical goods and pharmaceutical space. What was kind of comical and stunning to those of us who follow this closely is, well, first, there's really not a great case that the washing machine tariffs have been a big success. If you look at the data, for example, after they were implemented, you saw that prices of both washers and dryers went up significantly in response to the tariffs, costing Americans about $1.5 billion per year. And if you look at the jobs that were saved or created from the tariffs, there was about 1,500 of those. It calculated to over $800,000 per job per year. But it really was even a little worse than that, because the United States International Trade Commission, which is by law has to look at these tariffs periodically, showed that actually they really hadn't helped the industry much at all. Yes, there were additional jobs, but there were those price hikes that I mentioned. But the industry in the United States wasn't all of a sudden cranking out a lot more in terms of washing machines and dryers. In fact, output was down, sales were down. And again, all of this pre-COVID, while the U.S. economy was still humming along. But even more comical is that Whirlpool, the company that had petitioned for these tariffs, actually had suffered greatly from another set of Trump's tariffs, including those aluminum tariffs that he was reimposing yesterday. And so here's the president touting his economic nationalism at a plant that actually was suffering from that very same economic nationalism. So it really, I think, is a great example of how this stuff seems simple on paper, but gets frighteningly complex and problematic when it's put into practice.
Yeah, I mean, the market economy is so complex. Like politicians cannot possibly understand all the resources that are being brought into play in these manufacturing positions, right?
Yeah.
And they try to set these one-size-fits-all policies that maybe let's give them they're well-intentioned. We'll say they're well-intentioned, right?
Yeah, and I think that part of it is that there's still this 1970s, 1980s view of American manufacturing, where you have these big vertically integrated companies that produce everything from the metal to the finished good. Whereas in reality, American manufacturers are highly diverse and specialized and global. There was a great study just out I think earlier this week that tried to map out how the U.S. manufacturing sector works in terms of how U.S. companies transact with each other, whether they're making metals and selling them to other companies that are making appliances or whatever. And what they found was that tariffs and on some products end up hurting other manufacturers in the United States. And, Whirlpool is an example of that. And they found that a series of tariffs that have been applied under our trade remedies laws actually depressed employment in U.S. manufacturing. So that is a really important point, because if the goal of protectionism and industrial policy is to boost the U.S. manufacturing sector, and then you implement policies that actually hurt the U.S. manufacturing sector, well, I think it's pretty obvious that you don't want to be pursuing those policies.
Yeah, absolutely not. And just real quick, I forgot to give a shout out to Mike from Geneseo, who called over break to say he was enjoying this conversation. So thanks for calling into the studio, Mike. And of course, we love to hear from you guys. If you have comments, questions, give us a call, 585-346-3000. And thanks for folks listening online. My friend Mark Legowski online. Jay, you guys rock. Thanks for participating in the conversation there. Now, just real quick, are these tariffs coming, by the way? Is this policy set by Congress? Is this set by the president? Where is this even coming from, right?
Right. Well, it's a great question. And I wish we had more time, but I'll just say quickly, I'll give you my
4
elevator
minutes.
pitch. The United States, so Congress actually has the constitutional authority over tariffs. But back in the age of Smoot-Hawley, Congress realized that it really couldn't be trusted with total power over setting tariff policy, because essentially domestic interests could game the system and end up getting their own special carve-outs, and there was a ton of corruption tied to the tariff system. So Congress, starting in the 1930s, give or take, started delegating authority to the president over tariff policy. And some of that was arguably good, again, to kind of tie Congress's hands, and the president, of course, being the president, has power over foreign affairs and international relations, so that made some sense. The problem is that the Congress kept delegating it and kept delegating it and kept delegating it. And so we've now gotten to a situation where there are several laws on the books that allow the president to unilaterally impose tariffs on very flimsy grounds. And the only thing that can stop him, and this is according to the courts, the only thing that can really stop him is Congress. But the problem, of course, is that Congress would have to pass a law, and the president would have to sign that law. And that's going to be, of course, really, really difficult, particularly in a hyper-partisan era. And you're never going to get a veto-proof majority through Congress. So the result is that the tariffs that we've mentioned, the ones on steel and aluminum, the ones on imports from China, these were not implemented with the express consent of Congress. And in fact, on the steel and aluminum in particular, Congress has a lot of folks on the right and in the GOP and in the Democratic Party have screamed about this being an abuse of authority, but typical Congress, haven't done anything about it. And the courts just recently ruled that in general, the president has this authority and that this delegation of power is lawful. So we've ended up in a situation where tariff policy can quite easily be set by one person in the White House instead of, as it was planned by the founders, to be with Congress or at least shared between the congressional or the legislative and executive branches.
Yeah, so we're probably not going to get huge progress on that anytime soon, but we're about out of time. So Scott, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about all this trade stuff?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, the first place to go is the Cato Institute website at cato.org. My scholar page there not to sound all pretentious, but it has all of my writing, and then, of course, plenty more from Cato Scholars. And then you can always find me on Twitter, wasting time there, at Scott Lincicome.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll be back here on Radio Free New York on Monday. Talk to you then. Have a good weekend, folks.